So good morning, everyone. Ohayou gozaimasu. Thank you for those who will join our webinar for today. So we have our honorable guests today. I will present, first of all, our dear Netta Kalmanson, who will host the panel. So, and the first remarks I would like to ask to make from our honorable guest, Mr. Motoki Kurita, the economic attaché of Japan to Israel. And then Netta, you will be in charge. So, yoroshiku onegai shimasu.
Hi, good morning, everyone. As I was introduced now, my name is Motoki Kurita. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm commercial attaché of Embassy of Japan in Israel. I'm covering all economic and commercial relationships between Israel and Japan, including trade, innovation activities. 2 years has passed since I started my job in Israel. First of all, I'd like to convey my appreciation to IJFSCC, Sophiya-san, for inviting me such a nice event and giving me an opportunity to say some words at first. It is impressive for us that a lot of Israelis are interested in working in Japan. Now, the government of Japan is promoting for accepting foreign workers to Japan, especially for highly skilled foreign professionals. We have a policy target, which was decided by the cabinet, that we would certificate 10,000 highly skilled foreign professionals in cumulative total by 2020, and 20,000 highly skilled foreign professionals by 2022. As of the end of 2019, the government already certificated more than 21,000 foreign professionals already in cumulative total. So we are about to gain the target. Regarding non-highly skilled foreign workers, our government is, how can I say, prudent. But as for highly skilled professional workers, we understand that they are necessary for improving productivity of Japanese economy and accelerating innovation in Japan. Thus, we started many measures for highly skilled foreign professionals to get visas and come easily to Japan. For example, in 2012, the government created a policy measure called points-based system for highly skilled foreign professionals, which has point evaluation mechanism. Foreign professionals can get their points according to their professional careers, educational background, income, blah, blah, blah. And if their cumulative points reach to a certain criteria, they can get professional visas, which extend 5 years or in some cases forever. And they can also enjoy preferential treatments, which when they enter Japan, such as their spouses can also get working visa in Japan. JETRO opened portal site for highly skilled foreign professionals. On the portal site of the JETRO, you can find relevant information, including policy measures such as preferential measures, living environment in Japan, and a list of Japanese companies which are interested in hiring highly skilled foreign professionals. Historically, Japan started to grow economically by accepting foreign professionals. In Meiji era, 150 years ago, Japan opened its borders to foreign countries and invited a lot of foreign professionals in the field of industry, construction, agriculture, science, blah, blah, blah. And that built the basis of the country. Today, we are suffering for, or unfortunately suffering for low growth or minus growth for 30 years, mostly due to the lack of innovation. So we are welcoming foreign professionals coming and living in Japan. Israel and Japan have totally opposite culture or characteristics. Israelis are high risk taker, fast, speaking straight and frankly. Japanese are considering all the risks before they start, particularly with quality, hierarchical and polite. But I believe the combination of Israelis and Japanese are ideal for innovation because of this difference. For innovation is created by the collision of two different things and the fusion of them. So I think we can make truly disruptive innovation together, and this benefits both of us. So thank you for listening, and I'm looking forward to listening to constructive discussion in this event. Thank you.
Thank you, Kurita-san. The next one, I would like everyone to represent themselves shortly. So let's start with Netta Kalmanson, our board member. Netta?
Okay, so hello everybody and good morning or good evening in Tokyo. First of all, I'm glad to represent the Israel-Japan Chamber of Commerce. I'm very glad that a lot of participants are here. We are very happy to provide services, events, seminar to those who have a great interest in the Japanese market. And on behalf of myself, actually, I'm dealing with Japan. I fell in love in Japan many years ago and decided to introduce Israeli company to the Japanese market. And thanks God, dreams come true. A few years ago, we couldn't dream that so many delegations from Japan, well, prior to the COVID, came here and the other way around. And we can see really a great prosperous, thanks to the both visit of the Prime Minister, a lot of activity of the embassy in Israel and the Israel embassy in Japan, Chamber of Commerce and some other such institutions. And actually what we do, we introduce Israeli company Japan and help them. And in regard for the specific HR market, I will relate it later on after the introduction.
Okay, thank you. Next one, Henry.
Sure. Good afternoon or morning. My name is Henry. I'm here based in Tokyo, Japan. I visited Israel for the first time last year, and I was very impressed by what I saw there. I've been in Japan 17 years. I've obviously come from the United States, and my business in Japan was helping foreign businesses enter the market. We brought in about 1,000 companies over the past 15 years into the Japanese market, and a lot of them have come from Israel. And I was very curious. Last year, we had a number of Israeli clients call us and ask to come to the Japanese market. And I never really understood why, because I had never actually been to the country. And so I decided to take an indirect flight to Israel and see for myself what's going on. And as Motoki-san said, it's completely different there than in Japan. And it's a big startup culture and there's a lot of entrepreneurship there. And we're really been pleased by what we've seen in our business in helping Israeli companies enter the Japanese market. Just this year, we brought in 3 new additional companies. And our business model is a bit unique where we help find and staff people on behalf of Israeli companies in the Japanese market. Today, we'll talk a little about HR and all how that works, but I am excited to be working with the friendship organization and the opportunity to help Israeli companies enter the Japanese market. Back to you.
Thank you, Henry. So we have our legal advisor for HR market today also, Advocate Netta Bromberg from Barnea Law Office. So present yourself a little bit.
Hello, good evening and good morning, everybody. First of all, I would like to thank you for the opportunity to participate in this seminar. It is I'm very excited from this opportunity, and obviously the introduction about the relationship between Japan and Israel, business relationship, was fascinating as Japan itself. As my position is the head of the labor department here at Barnea Law Office, we obviously manage and advise relocation issues such as termination of employment, furlough. Even now during the COVID-19 crisis, we have to adapt to the current situation and the complex situation in the market. We handle waivers and releases before taking relocations. We advise regarding employment agreements and so on. Thank you and have a lovely seminar.
Thank you, Netta. We have from the practice field, we have Oded from Performance Revenues Company. So he is dealing with the field. Oded.
Hey everyone, and thank you for the invitation. My name is Oded Fromer. I'm the founder and CEO of Performance Revenues. We help Japanese app developers to take their apps outside the Japanese market. We're doing it for a few years now, and it's doing very well. As Sophiya mentioned, we're doing it in practice. We have our Japanese branch that is being managed from Israel. Besides that, I'm also a founder of a gigantic company, which is an app developer that took Japanese themes and made them Western inside the apps. I hope that we will all enjoy the seminar, and thank you again for the invitation.
Thank you, Oded. And last but not least, Gabriel Elmaleh from RGF Professional Recruit Company.
Hi, everyone.
Dear friend also.
Hi, everyone. My name is Gabriel from RGF Professional Recruitment. We are the global wing of Recruit, or Rikuruto, which is the largest recruitment firm in Asia. And while RGF itself operates within the Japanese territory and therefore is governed by Japanese labor laws, my mother company, Recruito, operates all over Asia. We, as a company, as a service, we do work with many Israeli companies that currently have an entity in Japan. But my personal interest is also rather big, as you may or may not be able to tell from my last name. I'm half Israeli and half Japanese, and have been involved in the IJFSCC scene thanks to Sophiya. Very excited to be here and looking forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabriel. So we'll start from our topics right now. Henry, would you like to start with a little brief about the differences, like maybe main differences between Israel and Japan hiring process, contracts a little bit, yeah? Henry, would you like to start? That's the issues that you wrote.
That's a pretty loaded question. All I'll say is this. I've been working with many companies that have come into Japan, and most of them have failed. I think I'll just start with that. The way that Japan works and its hiring practices and how compensation works, how you pay people, the importance of titles, speed, the mindset of an Israeli company and working with Japanese people. I have actually found a lot of friction in that space because it's not fast enough. It's never fast enough. And I think that is a big challenge that we find. And Japan, from a legal point of view, is a very pro-employee market. So what happens is someone tries to bring in a company, they set up a company, they hire someone, and then in 6 months, 9 months, it's not working out. For a lot of the Japan team, they're kind of, well, let's keep trying. But a lot for the foreign team, they want to shift it. And we see not just Israeli companies, but generally a lot of companies make a lot of mistakes when they're hiring. And probably the biggest mistake I find when people hiring here is they look for completely bilingual people. And it's kind of important. Japanese language ability in English is very weak. It's probably one of the weakest in Asia Pacific. And I'm happy to say it because I deal with it every day. And when you find someone that can actually speak to you in English, you're just so excited because you think, oh my gosh, this person must be really good. But what you find out is that sometimes people that are completely bilingual are being subsidized by their language ability. So what I always say is, look, are you sure you need to find that perfect bilingual person that can speak to you? Is it the right person really to drive this business? most of these people that are completely bilingual will not join startups. They'll probably join these bigger names that are foreign names in Japan. So I know I've got a colleague from RGF here in the recruitment space, but I know that hiring in Japan is very challenging because the pool is very limited, and firing in Japan is even harder because it's very pro lifetime employment. Back to you.
Mm-hmm.
Sophie,
oh, go ahead.
Sorry.
So Netta and then Gabriel.
I just wanted to add to what Henry just mentioned in a very short example that gives a lot, light on a lot what he just mentioned. And it's example from one of my customers that hire a new manager for Japan office. And they call me and say, listen, we want him to hire many more staff to his our company in Japan. And he's refusing, and he doesn't cooperate with us. And we wonder what to do. Maybe we will bypass him and hire by ourselves. And then I ask him, how long is he with your office, since you hired him? And they said 2 months. And then I tried to show them the difference because the gap is so big. And I try to explain her, listen, from Israeli point of view, new manager very quickly into the actual business and action item, etc. For Japanese, he just study you. He has no confidence. He cannot hire people and recommend the company. He knows nothing about you, and his confidence and his motivation is still in very low level. So it shows very much the different from HR perspective in this regard about the culture gap and the way people see the hiring process so much different. So
I would agree with that. I'm interested in Gabriel's opinion because he's the recruiter and he makes a lot of money from people like these people. So he's laughing, he's on mute, but he's laughing. But I know, I mean, I knew Gabriel's prior company was called CDS, and we helped set that up actually 15 years ago. So when the founders and I were working on that business, there is such a market. It's the most expensive recruiting market is in Japan. You're paying 35% usually on annual comp, and so you know, he should be buying his dinner, because I know that they make a lot of money on these placements because the pool is so limited. But also, as Netta pointed out, the fact that you can't just call someone, hey, come over to my company, because this market also doesn't really change jobs either. I mean, it's not like, I mean, most Japanese, they're pretty loyal to a company actually. And when they make a conscious decision to join a company, it's not only just for money. I mean, of course, it's gonna make a factor in that. It's the title that's very important. And when they're gonna recommend their friends to come over, they're not thinking, oh, it's a 1-2 year project. I am gonna work with you for a very long time is the philosophy. So that decision-making process, that time process takes a lot of time. But again, people like Gabriel, they do really well in this market because the pool is very limited and the fees are very high. Gabriel, push back on me.
Well, first of all, if I'm buying dinner, as long as it's some really good Israeli food, I'm willing to invite everyone that's here. So that's one. And number two, I mean, to echo both Henry's thoughts as well as Kamala's thoughts, it's really basic, simple economics. Japan is an extremely candidate short market. We're talking 2 to 3 jobs per one candidate. And if we go deeper into what Henry was saying, which you want these specific skills, specific knowledge points, we can go all the way down to 1 to 6. For every one good candidate, there are 6 jobs that have his or her name on it. This is exactly why its cost to recruitment in Japan is so high. There are the amount of man hours that it takes to recruit someone that is fantastic for the job. It takes an extremely long amount of time. Anyone that has used LinkedIn in Japan will be quick to notice that it is very distinctly different than using LinkedIn in Israel or LinkedIn in the United States or LinkedIn in Europe. It is not used widely in the general population. I think a part of that stems from the fact that LinkedIn is it's a very English-oriented tool. On that topic of English, it's considered that 1 out of every 10 people, so 10% of the Japanese population is set to have a manageable English level, which is to say business level English. It goes all the way down to 1% of the entire population when it comes down to fluency. And that means we're speaking native level fluency. You combine that with what kind of skills, what kind of knowledge points you need in Japan, and the amount of the pool of available candidates gets so tiny and gets so small, which is exactly why if fees were not at the levels that they are in Japan, it would make absolutely no sense for recruitment firms to actually operate here. The success rate is so low and the bar to enter is so high that the fees, it just necessitates those high fees. Back to anyone else.
Netta, I would like to hear your opinion, because we're in the Israel-Japan Chamber of Commerce receive a lot of like applications, CVs, so, and mails like we would like to go to work in Japan. So what about legal aspects? Maybe people don't realize the big differences, but do we have so much differences? Or the additional question, do we have some similarities with the, for example, Israeli companies' hiring process? Can you, back to you, yeah.
Well, first of all, what I would like to note that we need to bear in mind that in order to bridge the gap between the cultures, we might want to use an employment agreement as a tool to explain to the employee what are the expectations, what is the time period in order to build a business, what do we expect him or her to use as a professional tool during the relocation. That's, first of all, I believe that it is being done. Obviously, Gabriel will able to share his thoughts. A good recruiter also shows clarity in recruiting personnel and explaining the exact process and the exact expectation. I believe that by doing a clarified and explained process, we can help making a better relocation to Israel and from Israel to Japan. I think that we can obviously use the legal tools we have to explain to the employees their both the expectation from them and both what the companies offer to them back in Japan. We need to bear in mind that relocation as a whole is not an easy process. Globally or worldwide, data shows us that only that 15% of high-tech employees were sent to relocation, returned before the end of the term due to lack of family integration, health issues, or ineffective treatment by the company and so on, or the spouse did not receive a work permits and so on. So there are many reasons why an employee cannot benefit from the relocation, although usually it is a better, it includes better wage, it includes less stress than life in Israel, exposing the family to new and amazing culture, adventure, and so on. So we need to bear in mind the difficulties and just to bridge the gap by using our tools as legal consultants. Additionally, I would advise to consider the way we terminate the employment in Israel and do it as a whole, just to bear in mind that we might want to keep all options open to the employee if the relocation would not succeed, such as furloughing the employee from his or her current position in Israel and offering them the possibility to come back to Israel and relocate back to Israel.
I have one more question regarding legal documents and agreements. It's known that Japan is not used to many lawyers in the country. It's known fact, right? So, and the agreements are very short agreements as regarding Japanese traditions. So there is a lot of unknown things going on in the contract, as it's so for the HR market and the companies that would like to open their branches in Japan. Maybe Henry, you can add also your input.
You have a traditional Japanese company. You've got a single piece of paper that has kind of the key terms when you start, your salary and so forth, and then it references this massive book of rules of employment. And so that's kind of how a traditional Japanese company works. If you are a foreigner, if you're an expat coming here, you're probably not going to work for a Japanese company more likely than not. I think more likely you're going to be working for a foreign company, an Israeli company setting up a branch in country, and you can have a Western style contract. So as my colleague Netta explained, she's absolutely correct. You do need to structure an agreement in a way that's easy to understand for both parties. It also works the other way around. Sometimes, and I deal with this with more American clients, is when they put their American style format of an employment contract to a Japanese employee, they get like, what's this? You know, there's non-compete clauses, which actually aren't really enforceable in Japan, but it's like 10 pages long. And so there's a lot of things that need to be massaged when you're trying to employ people in the market. And to Gabriel's point, just really quickly, Gabriel said about the lack of talent in the market and the 1%. I fully agree. I mean, to be very honest with everyone on the panel, as soon as I heard he's half English and half Japanese, and he works there, I was thinking, how can I hire this guy? Because that's how rare talent is of truly bilingual people in Japan. And finally, I would say one thing. It's not just language. It's not just language. The communication style is just so different. It can be extremely annoying, very frankly, for Japanese people to work with, not just Israelis, but foreigners and people like me. It can be very annoying. And then working with Japanese the other way around can also be very annoying as well. But it's never said because it's a very indirect culture. So I understand why Gabriel makes the big bucks. And I agree with him that it is because of a lack of communication ability, a lack of communication style, and agree with Netta that the types of contracts that we put in front of these candidates that do come in can get very confusing, especially with a company that has no experience in the market. Back to you, Sophiya.
Thank you, Henry. Someone would like to add something? Oded, maybe from your experience, personal one?
Yeah, the way that I see it, at least, it's a question on the way that on how you act as a boss, as a manager, because you need to, there is some kind of conflict, because on one hand, you need to let go, because you need to recruit many people that don't speak your language, and it will be almost impossible for you to communicate with them. So you need to let go, you need to trust the person that managed them, on the one hand. On the other hand, as you know, in Japan, you need to get into details. And you need to explain exactly what is expected and how exactly things need to be done. So there is some kind of contradiction between these two elements. And I'm talking after the recruitment. I mean, the whole point is the way to balance between these two elements and make them, on one hand, understand exactly what is needed to be done, and on the other hand, to trust the people and let them work the way that they know and should.
We have one question from the audience. I can see a question from Ira Prigat. He's also a known businessman in Israel, Japan scene. Hi, Ira. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Can you share your view on what will be an effective screening process you recommend in order to increase the employment success rate on high-level management? So, who would like to start with this one?
If the panel doesn't mind, I could start answering this question. I think first and foremost, I'm going to try to answer so that this answer could be applied to all industries, since I'm not, depending on which industry, whether it be healthcare, IT, automotive, the specific skill sets that you're looking for high-level management might be different. The one thing that I think is a common thread is logical thinking. And this logical thinking isn't, I'm not necessarily referring to having the interviewee solve case studies as a lot of consultancy firms do. No, I'm thinking just have them tell their own story. Have them tell what led to this particular point in interviewing in this particular company. They've asked them why they chose to go to that particular school, why they chose to apply to this particular job after graduating university, why they decided to go for the promotion instead of just switching jobs. You'll start seeing a particular pattern. It's important, I think, for the employee first and foremost to know that their motivations are logically minded. It might not make sense to each individual, but there has to be a certain tying what in Japanese is called jiku. There needs to be some sort of base, firm connecting thread. Without that, you might be welcoming someone into your team that does not have, that has salary motivations and perhaps even career motivations, but they might not be as invested as you think you are and as you hope you are into your company. I'll bring it back to the panel. Thanks.
I think, let me just comment. I'm gonna just be very blunt. In my experience, if you wanna hire someone that's successful, to be successful to run your business in Japan, you hire a female, you hire returnee, and you hire young. And here's why. I have found that, you know, many people look at the CV when you hire someone. They worked at this, they're at this here. But what I found is that when you're starting a business or you're opening an operation here, you don't actually want someone that's kind of like the traditional corporate background. You kind of need someone that's had a little bit of challenges throughout their lives to be a little more entrepreneurial. And if I look at the clients that we've worked with and where they've been most successful, we find that a lot of Japanese women have made outstanding country heads. We find that with men, and I know I have lawyers in the panel, but I'm very honest, we find that men, they kind of have this kind of mindset and position that I'm in this role, so I need to hire this person to have the right structure because I'm the CEO and this is my title. We find with a lot more of the women, they get their hands dirty and they work harder. That's number one. Number two, we find language ability with women is a little bit stronger than with men in the market. And number three, we find that you know, most women, especially women that are returnees are women that are Japanese, but they lived abroad when they were young. They come back to the country. They often have a lot of reverse culture shock. They're like, wow, and they can't work for a Japanese company because they're expected to pour tea. And that's just not what they're built like. So what I would encourage people to do is don't just look at the CV. I know Gabriel's gonna push back at me because I know he sells a CV, but I would really wanna look really at where did this person grow up, right? If they are female and they're coming back to Japan and they live in the West, they're gonna be pressured to be a certain way and they're not gonna fit as a regular Japanese woman in this. And that's actually kind of the person you want. That's someone that thinks out of the box, that is good mid-challenge and wants that kind of entrepreneurial freedom to work with someone that may be more Western. So to answer the question about what kind of things you would do to screen, I would look less at the CV and more at the background of the individual, as well as the gender and the age. Sometimes we tend to hire people with the gray hair. It's important. I remember when I was starting my last business, I specifically hired an older guy to accompany me to meetings. I looked too young. I remember that. But I just bought him because of his gray hair. The reality is there's a lot of young people that may be great leaders as well in this market. So I encourage you to think out of the box when you're hiring. Back to you, Sophiya.
Just to add to that really quick, for high level, I agree with Henry entirely. For high level hiring, it is less to do with the CV. And when you're thinking of screening, I know that the questioner wanted a more efficient and effective process. But I think if accuracy is your goal, which I believe it is for the question as well, there has to be some sort of either face-to-face or in these current times, video-to-video direct conversation. That's it.
I have to agree completely with Henry. From my experience and from companies that work next to me and other CEOs they speak to, I saw the exact same things. Also, the question of the salary is a big issue. We didn't get to it yet, but salary in Japan is very expensive, as you heard and also as you know. And HR in Japan is extremely expensive. So when you find younger candidates with lower salary expectations, it reduces the pressure, regardless of the money, it reduces the pressure, and it helps you manage it in a better way and more in a way that you're hiring someone junior. You know that you first of all need to teach him, her, and let them understand how things are being done. So, in a very, it just makes sense because you need to explain to details and the salary is lower, so you know that you need to understand it. If you bring someone that is senior, you expect him to know everything. And it's very problematic, and this assumption is very problematic. And on top of that, you add the salary, and you add the fact that he didn't come from another country, he didn't come back from another country. It all makes it much more difficult to manage, and it creates lots of conflicts between you and him. So I have to agree with Henry that this kind of candidate, in my opinion, is by far the best one. This one, I mean, every CV that I will get of this kind of candidate, I will take it for an interview, even if I don't have any need to hire it at the moment.
And I would add, thanks for agreeing that. I would add one more thing. Don't just focus on bilingual, okay? I think many people think I need to have a bilingual person to do this business. We have found models where you have a very strong country leader that doesn't speak very much English, but he or she has a great right-hand person that communicates very well. The fact of the matter is this: if you get someone that's really too good, Gabriel's going to call them up and poach them from you. That's the reality. It's something that is really a rare commodity that everyone wants to find it. So younger people, returnees, a combination of people. You don't want to have a single point of failure in your business. These are usually cheaper as well. I think that this is a better approach to the market than trying to find that superstar, which very frankly, I don't see very often. Back to you, Sophiya.
Thank you, Henry. Thank you, Oded. We have a couple of questions also from the audience, so maybe we can open some of them. We have one question to Gabriel. You charge 35% fee for foreign company. I think you answered this one, I think. Is that works for Israeli companies? In Israel, we pay only 10% fee or less. I think it's someone who works in a Recruit company.
It sounds like it, but I don't mind answering it again because I think this touches on how different Japan is as a hiring environment. I don't want to seem like I'm repeating everyone's points, but to say again, the supply of candidates do not meet the demand of candidates. There are way too many companies that need, as Henry said, these superstars, these bilingual, young people that have the skills and the knowledge that's pinpoint onto whatever the goal is. Those people just do not exist. And even if they do exist, quite frankly, they do not register themselves on LinkedIn, and they are constantly bombarded by requests by recruiters. I think this is the key difference between Japan and, quite frankly, the rest of the world, whether it be the UK or the US. The recruitment fees are different, and this is again because the barrier to enter the Japanese market is so high that without this substantial incentive to encourage those to work on this field, there just wouldn't be anyone working on the field. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabriel. I think Henry opened this issue. We didn't want to open this issue, the differences between women and men in Japan. but you opened it. So maybe everyone can share their experience because it's a very sensitive issue in Japan. I think still
Well,
it's not as
I will tell you this
yeah.
right now, and I appreciate we have some political people in the attendees and so forth, but women are treated like crap in this country. I'll just say that. Basically, is how I feel. And 80% of my business is women, because because they work harder and they're multitasking, and they don't have these preconception that they should be entitled to anything. I think men feel that they're more entitled to things in this market than women do, very honestly. And so I have made my best hires have been these women that aren't being treated fairly in the traditional companies in Japan, giving them the opportunity, empowering them to try new things, allowing them to make mistakes, and still having their back. So I think that is one. I think another thing is that women tend to not negotiate their salaries very well. They tend to just kind of accept it as it is. And that's kind of, I would say that's a difference that we find. We work in HR a lot. We want to encourage them to be more straightforward, but I would find that women are a bit more passive here. Israeli women, when I visit, are quite strong. I'll be very blunt because I've been here 18 years, and it's just a different way of doing business with Israeli women than it is with Japanese women. I think that it's definitely distinct. But I think there's an amazing talent pool in this market of women that are very, very well educated and very well experienced. Back to you, Sophiya.
Thank you. Anyone else? Netta.
So may I add from my own experience that actually meeting career women in Japan is usually very exciting and very impressive. The women I did meet in a higher position were always very, very impressive. They should have worked very hard, be very smart, very efficient, very fruitful in order to reach this level of high position. On the other hand, even though thanks to the Abenomics and Womenomics, more than 2 million new Japanese employees enter the market, so still it's not easy to find them in high level, which is always very frustrating. And I'm sitting in a high level meeting and the number of women is very, very little. And the reason is because one of the way people are promoted in Japan is thanks to seniority, number of hours you're working, and some other parameter that unfortunately the women not always can compete with the men. And in this regard, it's a pity, yet we have to be to face the actual reality.
I have to say that, again, from an Israeli point of view, we're struggling with pretty much, I think that Netta can also agree, we are struggling here in Israel with pretty much the same issues. We wished we've had more female employees in higher level in seniority employees. I know that many high-tech companies in Israel are now developing in high schools and in universities are now searching for the next generation of developers or female developers, since we are, or engineers, female engineers and management level female employees. That this is a good question that, Henry, you've raised. It is relevant for both the Israeli market, and I understand that also in the Japanese labor market. We do need to bear in mind that it is, according to the Israeli law, you need to treat in equal manner to both men and women. We need to provide them with equal wage and equal opportunity and equal rights. And we also need to bear in mind that there is another issue. You've managed, related to the gray hair, the gray hair employee. So in Israel, I have to say that the issue of employing older employees was very, before the COVID-19 crisis, was very hot, and the Israeli labor laws again and again took the opportunity to negotiate and to relate to aging employees in their rulings. And this is also a thing that we should bear in mind. We should bear in mind that it is not only promoting women in the market, and it is also a question of diversity in workplace as an issue that we need to promote. Again, here in Israel, it is a very important issue that we are negotiating nowadays. It was obviously negotiated more before the COVID-19 crisis, but we need to bear in mind that it is not only promoting women that we need to discuss.
Kurita-san, you want to add something from the governmental point of view regarding women issue in Japan? How it's moving? Maybe you have some insights to share?
Yeah, as Netta-san, yeah, as Netta-san said, the government of Japan is now promoting to how can I say, promoting women in the labor market. So far, I'm not sure the detailed political measures, but so I'd like to add one thing regarding the women in labor market. It is often said there is a glass ceiling in the labor market in Japan for women, but generally speaking, I think the woman is more interested in international relationships or foreign cultural companies.
That's interesting.
Yeah, for example, I originally came from Ministry of Economy in Japan, and my ministry, there are maybe 30% women in my ministry of the whole employees. I'm not sure the exact number, but I think that
that's quite a lot for Japan, right?
Yeah, approximate number. But in the Department of International Relationships or Trade between the foreign countries, there are more than 50% or around 60% of women, because they are, generally speaking, absorbed to new culture of foreign countries, or how can I say, they are good at negotiations with foreigners. So yeah, and that's one characteristic of Japanese women in labor market, I think. Yeah.
So that's one point that the Israeli company should somehow take as a good point for Japanese market, HR market, that basically woman is much more comfortable in the international zone. That's what you say, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Interesting. Oded, do you have such experience?
Yes. You've been to my office several times. You know that, in my opinion,
there's quite a lot of women in the office.
I don't think about it about the Japanese market. I believe that generally women are better employees than men. In Japan specifically, I agree with that too. I think that they have much more touch to international business. They're more loyal. They're harder workers. So, you know, for me, it doesn't matter if it's in Japan or Korea or Israel. I prefer to hire a female. But, you know, that's my opinion. And from my experience, it's also, it's based on my experience. So yes, I agree with everything that was said here.
Thank you, Oded. We have quite a lot of questions in our chat. So hi, one of them. Hi everyone, I have two questions. What do the panel advise with the regards to bringing the cultural gap aside from hiring someone Westernized? And the second one, aside from title and salary, what do employees look for from a company they join and love? Who would like to start?
From my experience, from the business side, hiring someone foreigner in Japan that speaks very good Japanese is a pretty good option, I believe. The reason is that Japanese don't expect foreigners to be Japanese. They know that we're not Japanese, and they respect you for what you are. So if you have someone that wants to relocate to Japan and speaks Japanese and knows the materials, in my opinion, it's a jackpot. This is what I think. And you know, they don't, when a Japanese person meets a Japanese person, they need to act according to the guidelines. But when it's a foreigner, they don't have to do that. And it doesn't affect their appreciation or the way that they see you. So if, for the person that asked this question, if you find this person, I would go for it.
May I add, Sophie, that it's very difficult to give a general advice in such a huge topic, and it's so much related to specific field, to specific job, to specific content of what you're doing. And considering the fact that in many cases we have to manage Japanese living in Japan because we couldn't find a foreigner that will serve us the way we wish, there is still a huge business and culture gap. And I would say that from my own experience, first of all, it's very important to try as much as possible to touch base with expectation. This is something very basic that should be, because the Israel would think they want a result and a quick result, and the KPI is usually a cash factor is so important, a quick, and if possible, as quick as possible. And the way Japanese would look at the whole process is so much different. So first of all, try to put on the same level the expectation is something very initial and crucial. And the other direction, in terms of the actual, the way the Israel office would manage the Japanese is something very, very difficult, because the way that the Japanese would feel he wants to manage the company, and in order for him to give him the chance to succeed, we have to give him space to the way he sees the thing and the way he thinks the company could be blooming in Japan. And it's very difficult. So I would use any consultant in this regard to give some advice from the business point of view, and from the HR point of view. In many cases, I would suggest to hire a certified labor consultant, because in many cases, like firing people in Japan or the actual contract is something that is also very different. And the fact should be very much, people should be very much aware to the fact and the differences.
I would say one thing from my experience here, and I'll be very honest here, I don't know Israeli culture as well, but I would say one thing. Japan, you know, I think when you work with Western businesses, substance is more important than form. I think that's a kind of a substance over form. Just give me the result, you know, what's the KPI, measurable metrics of success. That's the terms we use. I think in Japan, form is sometimes more important than substance, to be very blunt. How you do something here is probably more important in many ways than what's done. You know, if you look at like just the gifts you give, souvenirs, like the packaging is more expensive than the actual cookie. But that's just the way you present it and how you do things. And I think understanding that if you do something the right way, even if it's something that may not be exactly what you want, that's going to bridge a lot of the gap here. Because you know what I found is that Japanese aren't as straightforward. They're just not going to tell you these things. And so it gets very frustrating when you try to make assumptions about how you work with people and their culture, because you read the books and all that. But you know, it's often much more about how you do something and how you say it versus what you say. And if you get that right, I think you can have pretty good success in this market. Back to you.
Okay, someone else would like to add something?
I'd like to take a stab at the second question now. Aside from title and salary, what do employees look for from a company they join and love? To answer this question, I think it's best for me to bring up, I have two companies that I am in charge of. Both companies are in the exact same field, in the exact same industry, and their business model is very similar. And they both have a high retention rate, also known as they do not have that many people that quit from their company. But the way that they maintain this high retention rate, I think, could shed some light on how to attract people. The first company is an industry leader. They implement the newest technologies into what they do. They have the most exciting jobs, the most exciting projects. The deliveries that they do are to the utmost affect the core of what these companies do. In essence, whoever joins this company gets to do something very exciting, very cutting edge at a constant basis. The second company is also a very good company, but they aren't at that level. What they do have instead is a very, very detailed and strong training regimen. And I'm not only referring to having new grads or inexperienced people join in and having them learn by lectures and such. A lot of companies have OJT, on the job training. This company doesn't do that. This company has a set amount of time, 3 months, where all your entire job is just to learn, just to absorb what you have to do. And the training and education doesn't end there. Let's say that it's your second year and your business English is a little shaky. Well, they have a business English language course that's specifically for people in this company. You're planning on becoming a manager, they have a managerial course. You're planning on switching from this particular job to this particular job in the company, they have a course specifically tailored for people that want to do that. It allows for employees within that company to pursue career development without having to pursue outside opportunities. Two ways of maintaining retention, but very different approaches. Back to you, Sophiya.
Thank you.
Gabriel,
Thank you.
how would you do? I think I know companies you're talking about. Those are big companies with big training budgets. When you're dealing with companies entering the market without the kind of head of learning and development in Japan and so forth, how would you, Gabriel, deal with that type of making your company attractive when you've got nothing except an idea?
So I think here, now what Henry brings up is no longer retention, right? Now we are talking about attraction, how to bring in this talent. I think first and foremost, if a company has literally nothing going for it and the CEO, the owner of the company agrees with that sentiment, that person will never ever be able to bring any kind of attractive talent. At a certain base logic, there has to be some sort of emotional appeal. If truly this is a startup company that has no presence in Japan, no presence anywhere, all you have is one person and an idea, then I think at that point, it comes down to charisma. It comes down to how well, not even necessarily how appealing that particular owner, CEO is, but more so how well are you able to convey that idea, not to the candidate, but to the recruiter himself or herself. You have to be able to convey that message to the recruiter, because it's the recruiter that's now going to be your mouthpiece to attract those candidates. And if you can't even convince a recruiter that your company is attractive, that your company is the future, that your company is an actual viable alternative to whatever exists, well, there's no way that that recruiter could convince a candidate. Thanks.
I want to add.
Yeah, sorry. I just wanted to say that we have legal tools to grow with the employees, such as option plans. And we do not, especially when we discuss startups, I think that options are one of the most attractive possibilities for employees. You need to take him or her with you to explore new opportunities, and yet you understand that the financial tools at the moment are limited. So why won't we use just another tool such as future options or phantom options, and so on and so on. So the employee will be able to bear in mind that if the company will succeed and the success will be upon his or her shoulders, then he or she will be able to benefit from the options. And I assume that should the company succeed, obviously there are companies who fail and do not succeed, but if the company will succeed eventually, then the programs will follow, and the beautiful explanation that Gabriel outlined here will eventually come true. There will be programs for managers, for senior managers, non-senior, the employees will be able to develop, but we just need to bear in mind that there are other possibilities to compensate employees even when the company only begin.
Netta, I have a question. Sorry.
I just, okay, Oded.
From your experience giving options to Japanese people work, because it kind of contradicts their lack of love for risk. So I didn't experience it yet. So I would love to hear from you if it really actually works.
And also, I would like to add to Oded's question another one, maybe more general one, but it will emphasize the question of the Oded asked about the mutual responsibility of the Japanese people vs personal responsibility of Japanese people. How it's so in these days, because I think it's quite different regarding past decades. I think it's changing. Is that so? So 2 questions for you, dear panelists.
Yeah, just one more comment related to the previous one, and on top of what Netta, Gabriel, and Oded mentioned, I just want to mention that in order to create the emotional commitment to the company and the excitement of the Japanese employee to the Israeli startup, from my own experience, the way we do it on top of trying to manage the local office in the right way and avoid dispute and tension, etc., is actually to bring them to Israel. This is something that we have a great experience with, that once you bring the Japanese to Israel, not only they meet the people, they see the office, they feel much more proud and committed to the company. It's really create an amazing, amazing results. And they feel so much more committed to the company after such visit, on top of the fact that Israel is totally different than what they imagined before that, but this is another issue. So sorry, but back to Sophiya's question.
That's a very good point. Yeah. We had 2 questions to answer. Henry?
What's the question?
With Oded asked 2 questions.
I asked
I for this question, I'll just say on the equity thing, it's never worked for me. I understand idea of phantom shares and all this type of stuff, but in my experience, unless someone has actually lived in kind of the Western place before, the concept of equity or short options are kind of more nice to have. The more important things for Japanese are going to be stability, number 1. Okay, do you have cash flow? Can this business be paid for? Number 2, the title. I want to be the Daihyo Torishimayaku, the representative director. That's important. You have to give the person the ability to show off their job without showing off their job. If you go back home and say, I get paid a lot of money, it may not be so good. But if they have the title, if they know that it's a very stable job, it's why many Japanese still tend to go to big famous names versus startups, is because it's more stable and it's less risky. So that was the comment on Oded about equity and stock options and phantom options. It really hasn't worked for me in my experience. Back to you.
I just have to know, with respect to Oded's question, yes, we've had several, I believe, according to what Henry said, I believe that my experience is a bit different. We've had several cases that the option structure has worked. You can, again, that depends with the company and the way the company managed to succeed, as opposed to a company that did not succeed eventually.
I think what I meant is it's not going to be enough to give options as a way to be attractive. That's what I mean by that.
Definitely,
Yeah,
I definitely agree.
options are definitely a nice to have. It works in terms of incentivization. But if I give you half the business, 50% of the equity, but you don't believe who I am, it won't go anywhere. That's what I meant by that.
I agree. That goes around the globe.
Yeah. I just want to emphasize also the title issue, which is so much important also from my experience, not only the fact that, you know, we are dealing with a culture that from the very initial stage, even in the university, the title is so much important, whether you are kohai or senpai, below or above me, and the way it influences the language, that you will talk in a different language if you are with senior or the other way. So also it's very much important, more than the salary. We're talking about Haji no Bunka. It's a kind of phrase that also related to the very much importance of the level and the face and the tatemae, etc. We cannot hear you.
You're mute.
Volume.
Sorry, I muted it. So thank you. We have several more questions from the audience. Is ESOP is complicated for foreign employees? Somebody would like to answer this one?
ESOP can be complicated for foreign employees, but I believe that with the right advice and the right tax advisors, it is manageable.
I agree. I agree with Netta on that one. ESOP actually works quite well with foreign employees because more foreigners tend to be interested in this. It obviously deals with two jurisdictions with tax, with your home country and where you're getting paid. And if you're a foreign company versus a Japanese company, you're usually getting options in the parent versus the subsidiary. So it does make it complicated, but it is something that is attractive as well. Back to you.
Okay, and another one, basically regarding this cultural gap. Oh, I lost the question. How Israeli can work in a company in Japan? I think that's the question. You guys said there are huge cultural gaps between Japan and Israel. I think it's someone from Japan writing us regarding the mistakes. So how can we bridge the gap as an employee? Somebody would like to answer this one? So anyway, we're talking about gaps, so maybe we can talk about somehow similarities, or if there is any similarities.
Well, before the similarity, I think one of the key issues in terms of the gap is that in many cases, while dealing with Japan office, one of the key problems that the Israeli office is facing with is the lack of transparency and the lack of information. So as employee, if you're asking from the employee point of view, I think that one of the very key issues to make things much easier and better communication is that the employee will provide as much as possible information, because in many cases, well, those are our customer, the way the Japanese would see it, and the customer is so important. And in many cases, the Japanese feel that the customer is actually more important than his employer in Israel, who is the head company. So it's so much important to have a transparency that the Israeli office will have a very clear pipeline. Who are the customer? What are the pipeline and the potential deal? And will provide such information on a constant basis to the mother company or head office in Israel. And this was definitely decrease the tension between the Japanese office from the employer point of view. Employee point of view, sorry.
Thank you, Netta. Someone else? Okay. Another question. So I think the salary in Japan is cheaper than in Israel, and that is a problem for highly skilled engineers. Is that correct?
If you go to a Japanese company in Japan, traditionally you're paid on your age if you're going to be hired. So if you're a highly skilled engineer, but you're 25 years old, you're going to be put into a category of that. I think that's been changing in terms of engineering. I think Japanese companies are realizing that they have to be globally competitive, so they are not following their seniority-based structure as much before. But it's not just salary. You're also treated a little bit differently as well as the young one. It's just a natural thing with age here. That doesn't go away with the policy change. So I would say that if you compare, I don't know much about Israel, but you look at the United States where I'm from, and you look at the engineering salaries there in AI and so forth and what they're paid here, it is completely different. And it's much lower in Japan for that level of employee. Back to you.
To add on a little bit on what Henry was saying, as a general rule, and this is, I think this spans across many industries, including anyone that's looking for engineers, is a Japanese, a foreign-owned company or a multinational company would typically pay about 10% more of a salary compared to a Japanese company. But they wouldn't pay what they are paying in their home country. So even if ABC company has headquarters in America and they're paying a certain amount, they will not pay that same amount in Japan because they're not competing against the American market. They're competing against the Japanese market, specifically Japanese companies. So all they have to do is pay 10% more. This is kind of sort of works in their favor. To echo back what the panel was saying, money, I mean, salary is important, but so is job security. And for those that have a bit more of a traditional mindset in Japan, the fact that you're joining a foreign-owned company where layoffs or just the complete retreat from the Japanese market is a possibility, it's always a cost-benefit analysis that goes through their head. That's it for me.
Thank you, Gabriel. So we have 15 minutes maybe to conclude, everyone, regarding our topics, to make some final remarks about opening an entity or a branch in Japan for a foreign company, maybe specifying a Israeli company. What will be your advice to end our panel? So who would like to start?
I'll start. We've been working with a lot of Israeli companies coming into the market using a different model of market entry. And so this will be a little bit of a sales pitch, so forgive that in advance. But the traditional way of starting a business in Japan is setting up a branch and so forth. But setting up a company is not easy. Opening a bank account's harder and is expensive and it takes time. What we've been doing recently in our business is working with Israeli companies that want to have a presence, not just in Japan. We have offices in all over Asia in so many countries, but Japan is the topic today. And we have hired an Israeli expat on an HSP visa because he's very talented to work on some potential opportunities in the Japanese market without a legal entity in the market. It's not something that will last forever. You know, hopefully you will set up a business in the future because that means you have a big opportunity. But I always encourage companies to look at Japan because we've said all the challenging things about it and this and that. I've also lived here for 17 years. You know, my plan was to be here 1 year and I'm still here. It's an amazing country. There's a lot of business opportunities here. And if you do it right, you can make a lot of money. It is a big market. And I know Israel needs to go abroad to find business opportunities. So I would encourage that Japan, with the right partners and the right approach, can be a very lucrative opportunity for you to explore. We've seen a lot of Israeli companies also been successful in this market. Back to you, Sophiya.
I totally agree. Sorry?
Netta.
Yeah, I just added, I totally agree with Henry. Actually, this is exactly what we usually consult to our customer. Don't start with a Japanese KK. Many companies are the first target. Let's open a Japanese branch, KK, blah, blah. And I think it's very risky and you rather go step by step. Japan is a challenging market, yet rewarding and promising. But you should start with a local activity. It could be either to dispatch your person from Israel or hire a local Japanese person or do any agreement with a local partner, distributor as a start. And only after you feel the market, you know your advantage, you build your local strategy, only then to establish your own local office.
One famous company I worked with was a company called Mobileye. I think it's quite well known in Israel. They set up their Japan branch here with us. They started just testing the waters. They didn't create this big business plan. let me dip my toe in. Let's see how it is. Let's make a few mistakes. Let's not get married before we date. And they became very successful in the Japanese market. And of course, they're a big Israeli success story as well. And we started them here in Japan. So I really agree with Netta. I don't want this panel to scare you, I think that's the thing, that's the message. We don't want to scare you because we're all interested in the market. We've all done business here. Just be guided with people that have probably made a lot of mistakes. I certainly have. Back to you, Sophiya.
Thank you, Henry. Oded?
I also think that getting into Japan step by step is the right thing to do. First of all, it's a very expensive market, and if you want to get all in, it will cost you a lot of money. And second, you need to also understand, right, this market is an amazing market. For me, it's the best market in the world, but it takes time to understand if this market is good for you, if this kind of business is good for you, because things there are moving much slower. To get it depends on the type of business that you have, but to get agreements there will take time. It's trust that needs to be built, and it can take years to build it. So you need to understand where you're standing and what is your how much time do you have to reach the goal to get to the Japanese market? Because if you want to get there in 6 months, I'm telling you right now, forget about it. If you see the big picture, if you're looking years ahead and understand that it will be a process, that you're building it brick by brick by brick, it will make sense. And it's very much not Israeli thing to do. We want everything to come fast. We want it to be, we're going to Japan, we want to build a Japanese branch. It doesn't go like this. Step by step, easy. You can get into government after you see if it works for you, if it has potential to work for you. You can get into governmental programs that will assist you, that you will get some of the money back, for example, if it's smart money program. But this should be the second step. The first step is to understand, first of all, if the market is good for you and how you're going to build it, and it takes time. That's it.
Thank you, Oded. Netta?
Well, from my point of view,
remarks?
Yeah, the key words are preparation, preparation, preparation. We need to be prepared with understanding the cultural differences. We need to be prepared with expectations to employees. We need, I believe, from what I understood from Gabriel and Henry and Netta, we need to understand whom do we want to recruit. We need to build a position and understand who's the employee that I am searching, which employee am I searching here, and what are my expectations. Preparation, preparation, preparation.
Gabriel, thank you, Netta.
To echo the panelists' thoughts, this isn't to scare everyone. And I want to, at my closing remarks, I want to focus on mitigating costs. So yes, it is an expensive market, but you've made the call, you've established yourself, whether it be via the KK route or whether it be via services that Henry offers, and you establish yourself here. How would you mitigate those costs? Well, again, going back to what we talked about earlier, the price is high because the effort required to succeed, to actually attract and recruit a successful candidate is so high. So lowering that effort would be the first step. The best way to do that is to work exclusively with the company that you would trust. By working exclusively with a company that you would trust, you give, number one, you're able to establish a strong relationship. A key thing here, to have someone that you're in constant contact with, to have that person be not only just a mouthpiece for your company, but a trusted advisor that lets the entire labor market know that you exist, that you are here, and this is what you have to offer. From there, because you have a trusting relationship, you are able to actually lower the amount of time, the amount of effort, and most and foremost, the amount of competition that you have to fight in this labor market, as long as you're able to work with a company that you trust, with a company that actually has clout in Japan. And my name is Gabriel Elmaleh from RGF. Thanks.
Thank you, Gabriel. Kurita-san, do you have some remarks regarding you living here for quite a long time already in Israel? So maybe you can share some thoughts about the cultural gaps also in HR market regarding big companies. I think you visited a lot.
So I don't have any expertise or experience in HR field. So I also learned a lot about the Japanese labor market comparing to Israel market. I learned as an audience. So
maybe
thank you.
How can we close the gap?
So that's also difficult for me. So so my advice is just to dive into the ocean of the country, and that's it. That's it. I hope.
And to swim.
So, yes, just swim. So yes, and I just wanted to say one thing as my closing remarks. That is the Japanese market is most specific with the quality of the product or the service in the world. So I think if you can succeed in Japanese market, you can succeed anywhere in the world. So we are looking forward to see many Israeli companies or Israeli professionals in Japanese market. Thank you.
Thank you, Kurita-san.
Can I add just one final remark? That actually, it seems like we're talking a lot about the gap and the cultural gap and the difficulties, but from our own experience, and I'm sure that Gabriel and Henry and Netta has their own good experience, as well as Oded, the success story, that actually we can work together very well with Japanese, although there is huge gap, there is a lot of difficulties, but in some way we complete each other. And the fact that we are coming with thinking out of the box and being very much intuitive and doing things from the bottom of our heart and very immediate reaction, etc., and our innovation spirit, etc., and the other great advantage that Japanese bring to the table, I think we can work together very well. The only thing is that being well prepared, working with the right people, having the right advice, and then the win is yours.
Thank you, Netta. So I think maybe we can answer, we have 5 minutes, 6 minutes. The last question can be this one. It will be the last question, dear audience. Is it a must to set up an entity in Japan? I think it's an entity, or can you hire a JP candidate to join your team full-time but fully remotely? Are candidates open and or comfortable with this setup? This seems more valid now with COVID-19 that are happening right now.
Let me answer that one, Sophiya, because that's my business. Every Israeli company we're working now in Japan has not set up a branch yet in the country. They're either planning to, or they want to test the market first, or right now because of COVID-19, there's a delay because of all these things that have happened. But they hired people in Japan. Japanese people don't like to be contractors. So one of the most important things you have to remember is that there's a social insurance program in Japan. And basically when you hire someone, they really generally want to be enrolled in these programs. Japanese people also don't do tax returns. Many Americans, they do their own tax returns. In Japan, the company handles that for them. So when you become a contractor in Japan, they're quite resistant to taking a position. So a lot of Israeli companies, they tend to find someone. They actually maybe don't talk to Gabriel. They actually, hey, I know someone in the country. I want to hire them, but they need to have an employment entity that can sponsor their social insurance and their pension and all that. And we've done that a lot. And not just Japan, for all of Asia, but in Japan especially, a lot of Japanese are more risk adverse. They like to use an employer of record, which is what we do, and have us hire on behalf, have them come to my office here in Roppongi Hills, have them see meet the Japanese team, have them know that they have a local support team. So we see this a lot happening with COVID-19. We have Twitter, we have Slack. Everyone's saying remote working is fine now, and this is going to continue to grow as higher remote workforce. Back to you, Sophiya.
Okay, thank you. Someone would like to add something? If not, we will close this session. Thank you so much for everyone to join our webinar. And if anyone has a question from our audience, you are welcome to send me an email and I will send it to our panelists. So they're all our members in the Israel-Japan Chamber of Commerce. So have a great week. You, Gabriel and Henry, enjoy Tokyo. Stay safe. And see you all soon. Kurita-san, thank you for joining.
Thank you very
Netta.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you guys. Have a great day there.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.